Hello everyone, and welcome to this short webinar which looks at some of the key national and local headlines concerning the Kreston UK 2021 Academies Benchmark Report. My name is Phil Reynolds and I am a Senior Manager here at Kreston Reeves who specialises in academies and education. I am also a Governor of a local multi-academy trust and sit on both the ESFA Auditor Forum and Working Group 3. So what are we going to cover today? So on today's agenda, we are going to take a look at the key national headlines in this year's benchmark report. We will also reflect on the current financial position of trusts both nationally and locally. And of course, staff costs, they also represent the biggest expenditure of an academy trust budget. And therefore it comes as no surprise that we'll look at this interesting area. And then finally, we will reflect on the current position surrounding governance. So, what are the key national headlines from this year's benchmark report? Well, firstly, we can see that the growth in maths has slowed, with the average number of schools in a maths only increasing by 0.5 to 6.6 schools. There is no doubt that the pandemic would have played a significant part towards this statistic. Our local data will show that growth slowing even further. Supply staff can be a burden to trusts in terms of cost, but nationally we are seeing savings. This is a positive for trusts and no doubt would have helped improve their end of year position. Whether or not the pandemic impacted upon this will remain to be seen, but we do suspect more trusts are looking inside their own trust employees and solutions rather than just outside of the organisation. All trusts saw an increase in free reserves and in-year performance. However, the closure of schools as part of the national lockdown very much played a part here. The unpredicted second national lockdown may also bring some savings, but the demand for investment in technology is potentially going to offset that alongside some of the other essentials, such as PPE and cleaning costs. Although many would argue they are not really essentials for a school. Trusts will be hopeful that there is an opportunity to reclaim some of these non-educational costs from the government and that the rules surrounding this are far less stringent compared to those back in July last year. Finally, gag pooling continues to be a preferred model the ESFA would like to see trusts adopt, and there is some increase in take-up. However, there continues to be a reluctance as the challenges of cultural change tend to overrule the decision to adopt the model. Our fact sheet on gag pooling continues to prove popular amongst trusts, which indicates the appetite for change is there. And if you are a trust considering adopting that model, then please do get in touch and we can assist you on this journey. So let's start having a look at the numbers. Last year, we reported that for the first time in a while, all types of school have reported in-year surpluses on a national level. And as you can see there, there's a vast change from 2018 to 2019. The 2020 in-year has also improved further. But if we look back at what this shows, the in-year result is calculated as being the underlying surplus of a trust after adjusting for items that can distort the result, such as depreciation, non-recurring capital income, and pension service charges. As I mentioned, last year we fully expected deficits to return this year, but as you can see, we, like many, could not predict a global pandemic would reach the UK. Therefore, the financial position across all types of trust improved. The most significant increase has come in the secondary schools, reflecting the fact that these schools were closed for longer than primaries during 2020, and therefore more savings could be made. In respect of multi-academy trusts, the increase is much lower due to the fact that maths primarily have a majority of primary schools within them, and therefore the savings were reduced. Overall, this is a positive for the sector, but equally should be met with caution because, as we know, many trusts have incurred significant expenditure in ensuring schools were COVID secure as schools returned in September for the 2021 academic year. From a local perspective, the position is much the same, but for local multi-academy trusts in the South East and London, it is not. Compared to last year, the position is actually slightly worse than in 2019. But why? Well, from a local perspective, whilst we saw trusts make some savings due to lower energy costs, educational supplies, and other property costs, we also saw trusts that looked to help the wider community and open summer schools for those children who could not attend their usual schools. Secondly, the impact of a good financial performance in the previous year impacted trusts' ability to make claims for costs incurred once schools reopened again in June. Many of the trusts in the South East elected against making a claim for COVID-19 costs as a result, with only 8 trusts making a claim in our data, and the average claim amounted to £54,000. Therefore, the majority clearly decided to wear the costs. This goes slightly against the national picture, where we know many trusts made claims, in fact just over 125 trusts in our data. However, the average claim value was roughly the same at approximately £49,000. Earlier, we spoke about the trust growth slowing. So as a reminder, from a national perspective, the average size of a multi-academy trust has marginally increased from 6.1 to 6.6 schools, an increase of 0.5. But as you can see from the table on the screen, here in London and the South East, the increase is even more marginal at just 0.1 schools. As we know, the South East was quick to the Academies movement, and many trusts were formed in London and the South East. And this was long before pressures were coming from the DfE regarding optimum trust sizes. As such, increasing your trust size here in London and the South East is a lot harder to establish unless you can oversee a merger or you can look to take on problem schools via rebrokerage, both of which require a significant amount of negotiation, time and effort. You also need to ensure your trust's house is in order, as they say. Adopting the ESFA's latest best practice is key to this, so ensuring you have a diverse trust board with good skill sets, you have 5 segregated members, are just some of the examples that are key to winning over the RSC when it comes to applying to grow your trust. Of course, let's not forget that although I doubt we ever will, there was a national pandemic. Therefore, many potential mergers or rebrokering of schools were delayed or even cancelled as priorities, quite rightly, shifted. This is perhaps the main reason why growth has slowed so dramatically locally as well as nationally. When we consider the financial position of a trust, too often the value of land and buildings and the local government pension scheme liabilities can cause distraction, when in actual fact, the financial strength of a trust is measured by its reserves. This is essentially what we refer to as the net current assets on the balance sheet. It is essentially the trust's working capital and their ability to pay the bills. As shown earlier, as you can see again on screen, nationally, most schools achieved a surplus in 2019-20, and this is confirmed in the national picture table with the average balance of free reserves increasing. Cash has also increased as a result. And again, locally, this has continued to be the case. However, the level of increase in cash versus free reserves has slightly retracted between 2019 and 2020. This is likely to be due to the loss of the other income that secondary schools would have suffered from due to the longer closures they suffered. We highlighted earlier that multi-academy trusts predominantly consist of primary schools, and therefore they tend to lack the ability to generate other income streams. This, coupled with many trusts locally electing not to make a claim for exceptional COVID-19 costs, would also impact upon the result. But overall, the position continues to be a positive one for now. So let's take a look at the largest area of expenditure and staff costs. And scrutiny over head teacher and CEO pay continues, and some trusts may find themselves scrutinised by the ESFA on their justification and rationale of setting certain rates of pay. As you can see, nationally, we've continued to see this level of pay increase over the years, which is to be expected given the standard pay increase given to teachers and also the continued increase in the size of mats, albeit a marginal one. However, when we look locally, it appears those increases are being slightly restricted at secondary school level, which could be an indication that the level of scrutiny is working. Here we can see that there's only been a 2.3% increase from 2019 compared to a 5.7 increase nationally. Does that perhaps indicate that London and the South East have a higher moral compass? I'll let you decide on that one. In the case of multi-academy trusts, locally, again, we've seen a slight reduction, but this could be due to the rate of multi-academy trust growth grinding to a halt in the past 12 months locally. Simply, just looking at the rate of remuneration cold like this can be misleading. Comparing these scrutinised salaries to average pupil numbers can actually reveal a lot more detail. So here, as we can see, when comparing to pupil numbers, it would appear that locally, in London and the South East, the level of scrutiny is potentially having an impact on those larger trusts where the majority of scrutiny is made. Those trusts with far fewer pupil numbers and perhaps more under the government's radar continue to show a reasonable increase, as you can see in the graph on screen. We're now going to turn to governance, and the subject of trustees is often an interesting one, with many arguing that for the amount of work that they are doing, they should be paid. The volume of administrative bureaucracy has been significant in recent years, and the role of a trustee continued to increase in terms of workload thanks to the pandemic during 1920. Many chairs of trust boards were used as a sounding board for effective decisions to be made regarding the closures and the reopening of schools. COVID-19 emergency committees were also formed as trustees rolled their sleeves up and helped trusts management teams in their decision making. Many of you have been unsung heroes and deserve an enormous amount of credit, when no doubt you was also facing tough times in your own lives, both personally and professionally. However, as we can see here, the numbers of trustees remain fairly static both nationally and locally, which perhaps indicates that we have reached what trusts feel is the optimum number for effective governance, regardless of a pandemic. We can also see that locally, the position has aligned with that of the National Trust position, as both secondary school and multi-academy trust boards have the same numbers as nationally. This perhaps further supports the argument around an optimum number. That concludes our summary of the 2021 Academies Kreston Benchmark Report. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you would like to receive a copy of our report, then please do visit our website at the address shown on screen. We can also provide a personalised benchmarking service for trusts, so do get in touch if this is of interest. Thank you and goodbye.